Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS legal hotline lawyer, and today is day 3 in our Form 22B home sale contingency addendum discussion. And today I want to focus on the bump period and what that means, the seller's bump. So when buyer agrees to purchase seller's property with a home sale contingency addendum, seller agrees to give buyer time to go out and sell their property, but it's not a completely free ride. What is seller doing in the background while buyer is out trying to sell buyer's home?
Well, as we said with the first video, the seller's home is still on the market, and so we're still trying to sell seller's home. And that may happen, and that's what we're getting ready to talk about.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Okay, so let's say seller now is approached by another buyer broker, another buyer who want to buy seller's home. What are we supposed to do? I mean, this is covered in paragraph 4, but see, and when I talk about this, I always caution licensees, because if we do it the wrong way, it's a really, really big mistake. So we want to make sure that we do it the right way.
And you're talking from the seller's perspective.
I'm talking from the seller's perspective.
Okay, and so the right way is listing broker, you get an offer that might bump the home sale contingency buyer. So you get what we call in our industry, we call it a second offer, because we're ultimately going to refer to Form 39, which is the second offer addendum.
Yes.
So we're going to call it the second offer, not to be confused with a backup buyer, because right now we're trying to bump the home sale contingent buyer with a second offer. So listing broker, your seller receives a second offer and it is acceptable or desirable to the seller. The seller would like to do business with this second buyer. Before your seller gives a bump notice to the home sale contingent buyer, your seller must accept or counter, but reach mutual acceptance with the second buyer. You never bump the home sale contingent buyer unless and until your seller has reached mutual acceptance with the second offer.
Never give them a notice, a bump notice.
You want to tell them why?
Don't give them a bump notice until we are under contract using the Form 39 with that second buyer. If you do it the other way, we give a bump notice before we go under contract with the second buyer, the seller could end up empty-handed with no buyer, because our 22B buyer terminates the contract, which they contractually can do. And then when we go to engage with our second buyer, they may have already found a home and may have already gone under contract. Now we're out.
And it's not only a bad idea, as Ken describes, it would be a violation of the Form 22B language, because Form 22B says from seller to the home sale contingent buyer, I won't give you a bump notice until I've accepted an offer from a second from a second buyer. So, okay, so now we've got the order of events.
Okay.
So seller wants to enter an agreement with a second offer. How do we do that? There's an absolutely critical piece to this, and if we mess up this piece as a listing broker, seller has sold their home twice. So what do we need to do to make sure that seller hasn't sold their home at the same time to both the home sale contingent buyer and the second buyer?
So it sounds like you're referring to Form 39.
Okay, I think you're right.
Okay, so that's where Form 39 comes in, and we have to understand Form 39 because I think a lot of folks may not even know 39 exists. So Form 39.
Okay, and before you explain Form 39, in case I wasn't clear the way I just said it, if your seller is subject to a home sale contingency addendum transaction, listing brokers never, ever, ever let your seller sign another offer with a bumping buyer unless and until the Form 39 is included.
Yes.
I often say that a seller cannot, just as a general rule, if a seller is subject to a home sale contingency addendum, seller cannot accept a bumping buyer. Because most bumping offers aren't going to come with the 39 in them. In fact, seller must counter to include the Form 39. So that's really the bright line rule I want you to take away from this, listing brokers. You cannot enter an agreement with a second offer, with a second buyer, unless and until that Form 39 is included. Okay.
And don't rely on the selling broker to include it. Like you just said. So we need Form 39.
Don't rely on the buyer broker.
Right. So Form 39?
Form 39.
So Form 39, and when you see the first paragraph in Form 39, you will understand now why we use Form 39 and how we can go under contract with two buyers, essentially, but not having sold the same house twice, if that makes sense. Because paragraph 1 in Form 39 explains to our second buyer, should I refer to him as a second buyer?
Yeah, because that's the name of the addendum is a second,
so we'll be
second buyer addendum.
Okay, second buyer, contingent buyer. So paragraph 1 in Form 39 explains to the second buyer exactly the situation we are in with this contingent buyer. It discloses everything, which they need to understand. And furthermore, it also explains how if we do go under contract with the second buyer, they're in a position where they may not ever have an opportunity to buy our house if our contingent buyer waives the 22B and agrees to close. Or if our 22B contingent buyer terminates the contract, which they can do, what I like about Form 39 is automatically this second buyer is in now, I don't even want to say first position, but
they are.
Okay,
that's it.
I didn't want to confuse what second buyer did.
Okay.
So they'll be in first position automatically.
If the home sale contingency buyer goes away.
If they go away, if they terminate and leave, the second buyer is automatically in first position. They don't then get to decide again, do I want to still buy the house or not? They're in first position, and if they don't want to buy the house, then they're risking default and the remedies outlined for default.
Right. Okay. So, listing broker, not only is it critical that you include the Form 39, but Form 39 is actually a really, really helpful tool in your listing broker toolbox. Under paragraph 2 of Form 39, there's a series of checkboxes, and the checkboxes correlate to things like buyer's waiver of the inspection contingency, buyer's waiver of their right to terminate based on the home sale
seller disclosure
statement, the
All
Seller
of-
Disclosure Act. I'm sorry, I was
Yeah.
trying to come up with the right word. There's a box that correlates to the resale certificate, right? The inspection contingency, the financing contingency.
all of the things that I kind of call low-lying fruit, where a buyer has abilities to get out of a contract, paragraph 2 in Form 39 enables the listing broker and the second buyer and their broker to exhaust all of those easy outs that they have in a contract.
Right.
So that if they do end up being in first position, they then can't go back and say, we disapproved the inspection and terminated the contract. They've already eliminated that in paragraph 2 prior to us even giving the bump notice to our contingent buyer.
I actually heard you describe it the other day as escape patches. I think that's a good way to think of it, because the paragraph 2 under Form 39 lists a bunch of buyer escape hatches, or escapes from the transaction.
Yeah.
And so as you check those boxes, you're
just closing the escape
closing the escape hatches so buyer can't get out of the contract on those bases. But what it means to a buyer, and this is where it's a little tougher to, it sounds super simple to negotiate. Yeah, this helps seller, let's make sure we do this. Problem for buyer is that, remember, we're still dealing with a buyer who may never ever actually get to purchase seller's home, because there's a home sale contingent buyer out there. And so listing brokers, you're asking the second buyer to, let's say, do their inspection, waive their financing, waive their Seller Disclosure Act rights, whatever it is, for a property that they might not ever even get to purchase. So this is an issue where there could be some back and forth negotiation as to what seller really wants this buyer to do and what this buyer is really willing to do.
Sure.
And certainly, the competitiveness of the marketplace and everything else is going to make a difference. I would think that this is a place where the number of days, which we haven't talked about yet, let's talk about that.
Okay.
The number of days in the seller's bump becomes a factor. Because if I'm the second buyer and you're asking me to do my inspection now, so that you can then deliver a bump notice and then give that buyer 5 days to determine whether or not they're going to bump, that might impact whether or not I'm willing to do my inspection now, versus whether you're going to give them a 1-day bump period, for example. So let's hear from a DB's perspective, the bump period discussion.
Okay, so the bump period and what we're referring to is once we go under contract with the second buyer, we're now ready to deliver the bump notice to our contingent buyer. Now, the paragraph in the 22B is paragraph 3, is it?
I think it's 4.
4. Property remains on the market, paragraph 4. It defaults to 5 days. You can write in something else, but it defaults to 5 days. So what that means...
So 5 days for the bump period is what you mean?
5 days from the bump period, and what that means is we're under contract with second buyer. I now deliver the bump notice to my contingent buyer. They have 5 days to decide they're either going to, in essence, stay in the contract or get out of the way. Those are their two decisions. So that's 5 days, and that's a conversation that you need to have. 5 days, is that too much? Is it not enough? Should it be less? Should it be more? But that's the time period the buyer is going to have to decide, do we think we can buy the house and waive the contingency, or I don't think we can buy the house, we're going to terminate and get out of the way. But the default, we have 5 days to do that.
Right. And during that bump period, I like to describe that the buyer really has 3 options. They can give notice that they've actually already sold their home. They can give notice that they haven't sold their home and they're not going to be able to sell their home. 4 options, sorry, not 3. They can also get really lucky and find a buyer during that bump period and give notice that they sold their home. Or they can waive their home sale contingency, which we'll talk about in a minute. So if I'm the second buyer in a fast-paced market,
Right.
and you want me to do an inspection now or waive something that's important to me or invest some money in doing something up front, knowing that the home sale contingent buyer has 5 days in a market where things are selling fast, then that might not make as much sense to me.
It may not.
So there's the reason that 5 is in there is because 5 is as good a number as 1 as a default number of days, because listing brokers here is, I guess, what I want to emphasize to you. There is no one-size-fits-all answer to the question of how many days is the right number of days in the bump period. It might be 1 day, it might be 5 days, it might be more than that, I guess, under some circumstances. But listing brokers, you've got to have a conversation with your seller about the significance of the bump period, really factoring that into the current marketplace, the strength of the original buyer's offer. If your seller would really, really like to sell to this home sale contingent buyer, they want an out if this property's not selling, but really they like the terms, they like the price, they'd really like to sell to them, maybe they want to give them a little extra long bump period. So there really is no magic answer that says this is the right number of days, but you are absolutely required to think through this issue. Again, totality of the offer, all of the terms together have to be considered. It's your job to educate the seller and empower them to make the right decision.
Yep. Good.
Okay. Is this the place to talk about buyer waiver or in the next video?
It feels like the next video.
Okay. Okay. So, anything else on seller bump periods?
I think we covered it, Annie.
Okay. With that then, if you have any questions, please send them to me, legal hotline at warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.